Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. This is Carrie with Booked for Romance, and today we are going to be discussing fantasy romance for beginners. But before we get started, I wanted to show you guys my fantasy shelf. This is my fantasy shelf. It kind of goes up high. But yeah, this is like my beauty right here. I tend to only keep books that were my faves. I do have SJ Mass up there. Maybe I'll tilt you guys so you can see it. Here, let me give you a little tilt. Can you see her? She's up there. This way. There's a ton of books down there too. So what was on the lower two shelves were the books that I haven't gotten to yet. So those are ones that are to be read, which all of you probably have. But I wanted to start off by showing you guys my shelves of my fantasy romance. Over there on that shelf is all of my historical romances. And yeah, I think I'm going to sit in my comfy chair today and we'll talk about fantasy romance for beginners. So let's get to it. Okay, so I'm in my big comfy chair, and we are going to start talking about fantasy romance for beginners. But before we get started, I have two things. One, there's nothing better than talking about fantasy romance unless you're wearing the gear. And today I'm wearing my little Alice in Wonderland shirt because, let's be honest, nothing says fantasy like Alice in Wonderland. So anyway, so I have my Alice in Wonderland shirt on. Second thing was that I got some book mail and I have not opened it yet because I wanted to show you guys. Here it is in my package of book mail. I'm very, very excited. I have cut into it just so I knew what it was, but here we go. I'm very excited to show you guys. I knew this was coming and I waited to crack into it because I was going to use this book for fantasy romance for beginners. But if you know anything about fantasy romance people, we love not only our book mail, but what comes with some of our book mail. Like, okay, I'm just going to show you. It's just better to show instead of tell you all about it. Okay, here we go. Crack into this. I'm a person that opens presents, not neatly. I like just rip into it, you know. So here we go. Awesome. Fable by Adrienne Young. I'm so pumped about this. Oh. Okay, here we go. This is what we're excited about. Check this out. If you're a fantasy reader, you will always appreciate some good book art. And I feel like in fantasy, you do get a lot of book art. So that's one thing I just absolutely love is the book art. Second thing, let's appreciate this cover. Look how beautiful this is. Totally gorgeous. She's doing this book, and then the second book will have the other side of her face, so you'll get to see her whole face with both books. So brilliant. And then the author personalized it to me, and I had her write this quote. I had her write, "To the gem of the sea." And you'll know what that means when you read this book. And she signed it. So thank you, Adrienne Young, for that. I really, really appreciate it. I will be talking about this book in this beginners for fantasy romance, because then it's, if you have had heard of these other books, then you know that this is a brand new book. So the odds are maybe you haven't heard of it yet, so giving you something a little bit new. Okay, let's get started, or else this video is going to be a little bit longer than what I want it to be. Before we get started, I want to let you guys know I did pick YA fantasy romance. And the reason why I picked YA fantasy romance is because with the YA genre, I feel like it introduces you into fantasy in, I would say, an easier way. If you go straight into adult fantasy, it's definitely, you get a whole world, you get a whole magic system. It's more complex, where I feel like in YA, they do simplify it a little bit. And I appreciate that. I like simplicity in my books. I don't want to have to like research the book before I read it, you know? So and sometimes some of those authors get to be so complex, you actually have to go and figure out what they're talking about. So that's on another day. But going back into this. So I do have YA fantasy picks. For the first book, I had picked one of my favorite authors. She and S.J. Maas are like close at number 1. Her name is Mary Pearson, Kiss of Deception. If you have not heard of this book is fabulous. I just absolutely love it. 5 stars. And what's great is if you love historical romance, this is not that far of a stretch from historical romance. If you open it up, which I'm going to, it gives you, because you know, as fantasy readers, we have so much fan art. It gives you a whole kingdom. And what's great is, as you can see, the different castles, and it kind of sets you up for what kingdoms you're going to be hearing about in the book, and it kind of gives you a layout so you kind of know what journey she's going on. And if you need to reference something, it's good for reference too, to have like that visual, which I always kind of need. So let me tell you about the book. We start off with Leah, and she is from the House of Morrigan. And she, in her kingdom, has made an alliance with a neighboring kingdom. So she is in an arranged marriage with a prince of a neighboring kingdom. Well, we start off with her on her wedding day getting ready. And she has a thought that this is not really what she wants. And she ends up bolting. She's out. She's not going to do this. She doesn't care if it's for political gain or not. So then she ends up leaving. Unfortunately, the prince gets wind of what has happened. And he is so angry with her, he ends up going and trying to track down the princess to confront her. Well, there's a third kingdom. This neighboring kingdom does not want this alliance to happen. So the neighbor, we'll call them the villain kingdom, has sent their assassin to murder the princess. So this alliance could never take place. That's where we start with Kiss of Deception, seeing that there's an assassin and a prince running after a princess, which I think is just so brilliant. But what's even more brilliant, what Mary Pearson does, she doesn't tell you who the prince is, and she doesn't tell you who the assassin is. So you're going into this story totally blind, and you're following the princess, and you don't know which way or who you're just on suspense the whole time. It's just great. You're just gonna love it. This book is a 3-book series. I would recommend reading all 3 books. This is a romance that travels through all 3 books. She is the main character for all 3 series. So that is the first one. I highly recommend it. It is a really great read. You should enjoy it thoroughly. And this is a great start to fantasy because I think there is minimal magic in here. There's a little bit of magic in here. So there you go. Okay, the second book. This one does have quite a bit of magic. This is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. And I have to show you because this book was autographed. I did not get this autographed. I found this at a library sale for $1. But it's worth way more to me than that. So we start off with our main heroine, Scarlet. And she has always wanted to go to Caraval ever since she's been a little girl. And Caraval is a magical carnival / game. So it's something that you go to that not only you can experience, but you're also playing a game in Caraval. So the only way to get to go to Caraval is if you know somebody or you get a golden ticket. And unfortunately for Scarlet, she has been writing the master ceremonies all of her life, asking to get to go to this amazing game / circus. Well, one day a stranger shows up to Scarlet's house and says, guess what? If you guys help me, I have a golden ticket for you and your sister Tella to go to Caraval. So they end up agreeing to the stranger's request. And since she's actually in the middle of running away from an arranged marriage, she's running away from an abusive father, which if anybody has a trigger for that, I just want to let you know that that is in there. So trigger warnings for an abusive relationship. And they end up going with this stranger on their journey to Caraval. But the kicker is once they get there, Tella is kidnapped. So the game becomes a whole new experience for her. that's the start of this Caraval. It is beautifully written. It's a great magic system. I loved it. All the characters, just brilliant. And this is also a 3-book series, but it does follow different people. You follow Scarlet for the first one, you follow somebody else for the second one, and then for the third one, all the characters get back together. So, yeah, so that is Caraval. Highly recommend. I loved it, and it's a great start for a fantasy read. Romance in here, I would say, the romance is very sweet, and I just loved it. Absolutely great read. Next one, the anticipated brand new release of Fable. Was this a 5-star read? Heck yeah. Was this something I would recommend to everybody I know? I am doing that. Would this be a book I talk about for the best book of 2020 for me? Absolutely. Now, I am a romance channel. I would rate this romance light. There is romance in here. Absolutely. I would not read a book that did not have romance, but the romance is light. So we start off with our main heroine, Fable. And Fable has been left on this cutthroat island. About 4 years ago, she saw her mother drown, and her father just had pretty much abandoned her. Her father is a cutthroat mercenary, and all she's ever wanted was to be on his crew. So her goal right now is to just try to get off the island, confront her father about leaving her there, and taking her rightful place at his side. So that is pretty much the start of Fable. Everything, again, I told you is on the inside cover. I don't like to give spoilers. It is just so good. The whole thing from start to finish, I just absolutely loved it. I can't wait for the sequel. It's just something that I would definitely recommend to anybody starting out in fantasy, because I feel like, again, it's fantasy light. So it does have some magic in it. You have amazing cast of characters that it's easy to follow. You're not following like 16 different characters. I think you're following just a few. This does hang on a cliffhanger. So with cliffhangers, the second book comes out in March. I have fair warned you that this does hang on a cliffhanger. So if you don't mind hanging out with the cliffhanger for a little bit, because I love what Adrienne Young is going to do. She's going to release her books in 6 months. And I'm just like, thank you so much for doing that, because at the end of the day, I forget. I read over 100 books a year. Like, I forget details, like just the details of it. And like, for me to go back and read something I already read, I just don't love doing that unless I'm like gonna reread the series and I'm like, okay, let's do a reread. And because I know I love the series, which for this one I wouldn't mind, but I mean, it was hard for like The Cruel Prince, because The Cruel Prince was like, I forgot some major details to that, because I tried to like wait each year, and then I didn't reread, and I should have just reread. And another amazing book, which I will probably go into detail about that one at a later date. But I wanted to start off with just those 3, because to give you the ones that had really like, hit home for me. And Caraval was actually the first fantasy book that I actually dove into. And Mary Pearson, I mean, I just loved her so much. And so Adrienne Young, she's a new author. I think this is her 3rd book. So she's an aspiring young one. So gotta support the newbies like me. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Please put in the comments below if you have read any of these and loved them, or if you're going to read some, or if you read them off of this recommendation and you really liked it. So I hope that was helpful. I will be doing more fantasy recommendations, and yeah, I hope you guys like that, and we'll talk soon. Bye.